Hello, everyone. Welcome to ThinkWell.
Yes,
I'm
ThinkWell,
here-
please.
Yeah, I'm here with George, and I'm Laura.
Hello.
So we've been discussing the political issues that are happening as of late, and one of the many issues that we would like to touch base on is immigration.
Mm-hmm. We're getting political again, then. We're talking about politics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is something that totally fits in with our wellness.
Well, we want to touch base on immigration and also censorship. You know? So I think those are two very important issues that we really want to have a conversation about. And I mean, essentially, we're both on the same page about this. So, yeah, we'll start with immigration.
Good. You be the devil's advocate, and I'll be the hero.
Well, so I've been noticing, not just on social media, but even with people that I communicate with, a lot of people are having issues with immigration here in Canada. The States too. Here in Canada, I'm hearing, but now is not a good time for immigration. It's not good for the economy. There's too many people from this country, that country. And one of the countries that comes up a lot is India. And that to me is very concerning because at the end of the day, I'm Canadian, born and raised, but my parents weren't. They're from Bolivia. You weren't born and raised here. You're from Chile. So my concern is are we becoming more of a, I always remembered Canada as a kid being so accepting to other cultures and colors and we were so open to it. Now I feel that people are seeing immigration as such a bad thing, especially from India, from Pakistan, so I'm starting to see a pattern that it's the visual minorities that are being under attack, that they shouldn't be here. They're taking our jobs. The reality is Canada is supposed to be a multicultural country. We've always been very accepting to so many different cultures. So this is my concern. I feel like we're almost like we're at a point where we're going back maybe 30, 40, 50 years where we think, we have to be a certain color and a certain race to be allowed in this country. And that's very concerning because the history of Canada is very similar to the States where, we came in and got rid of First Nations and no one even considers them. And now we're having an issue with people from, other countries with different pigment skin. Now they're the issue. Mm-hmm. It's concerning.
Sure.
Right? So, yeah, it's, we've had some great conversations about this and where do we go from here?
Well, okay, yeah. So you mentioned a couple of things that are worth talking about. So, for instance, the first one would be Canada has not always been a tolerant nation. First of all, the fact that Canada was founded upon a genocide of the Indigenous peoples, that doesn't make Canada a tolerant nation. Also, because I'm old enough and because obviously learned this in school as well, multiculturalism was an idea that started, floating around, in the late 60s and 70s under Pierre Trudeau. Mm-hmm. He was under a lot of, whether you agree with Trudeau or not, I'm talking about the father, that's a different story, but he was under a lot of attack for promoting multiculturalism, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, there were times when, and you're right that Canada always follows, the United States, and whatever's happening in the United States is a ripple effect. And Canada's closest to the United States, so it's a very similar thing. The only difference is the population is so small, and so it's difficult. Plus, we also have a different type of different type of arrangement here, right? We have, people call us in the States, they call us socialist. But the fact that, our healthcare, universal healthcare coverage and all that, and our education and things like that, really, we are a really good society in terms of stability, political stability, economic stability, and social stability, right? However, they're the same kind of sentiments that you see in the United States, right? Because we are a founding nation, the same people that came to colonize Canada are the same people that came to colonize all of the Americas, basically, right? So the history of tolerance, and that's the word that's used actually, which I totally I'm against the word tolerance, but I get it. I get what that's called, but I wouldn't. If you have kids, for example, you wouldn't just say to them, "Oh, just tolerate, your mother, or tolerate your neighbors, or tolerate your teachers, tolerate your education, tolerate this." You would actually, that would be kind of meeting the minimum standard, right, of tolerating, right? And so I think it's a word that has never been questioned, right? Tolerance. But anyways, it's part of the whole multicultural thing, right? Tolerance. And that wasn't something that was widely accepted. There was a time in Toronto when there were signs on, what's that beach there in Toronto, the East End, Cherry Beach? There were signs there that said no dogs allowed, no Jews, and no Irish people, right? I don't know what they call them, right? At that time. There was also a law, I remember, that Italians could not be in groups more than 5, I think. Right, maybe I'm wrong about that, because they would be harassed by the police, right? These are Italians, they're Europeans. One of the senators, a Canadian senator, black person, of course, was, when growing up, they had to go to, when they went to the movies with their friends, with their white friends, they had to go upstairs, I believe, because they were black, right? And their white friends downstairs. So there was a separation there as well. That's segregation, right? It wasn't as bad as the U.S. The U.S. is brutal for sure, and it's legislated, but you had kind of very similar things here, right? So there, and again, not to mention the atrocities committed on Indigenous people. Now, have we definitely made progress and get to the point where multiculturalism is something that's been widely accepted, and of course also we have to see the needs that our society have. We've talked about this before. We're a country of old people. Basically, the death rate exceeds the birth rate, right? So you can't sustain a country and economy, you can't sustain anything without having more people. And the only way to do that is, if you're not going to have more babies, you have to have people from other parts of the world. The other point there is that it is the colonial powers in the old days that moved around the world and colonized and took and raped and pillaged and did everything that they could do to non-white societies, right? So let's talk about India. Let's talk about Great Britain. Great Britain, the great empire that colonized India and committed great atrocities in India, right? Now, it's funny because they went there with no permission. They went as illegal immigrants, the empire that is. They took whatever they wanted. They created a system. They didn't ask anyone for permission, right? They divided the country. And so when we talk about, oh, these people are coming over here, they don't belong, they do belong, right?
Yeah.
Because, even if you want to get into a really childish argument, which I would support, would be, hey, you were there, now we're just coming over here. You told us we're part of the empire, right? Well, we're here now. We want to live here just like you want. And on top of that, we're being better than you because we're going through a process, right? A process of, getting selected, process of, immigration, whether it's just a refugee claimant, whether it's a whatever, a tourist extending or overstaying their visa, whatever the case is, whether you come into this country, in this case, we're talking about Great Britain for work or, education, whatever it is, right? that's the other thing. And so if when you look at the states claims that there's this one founding race, of course, ignoring the dark race that was here way before them.
Yeah.
And this is not about race. This is about what people think that race can do for them, right? And so it's not about thinking that white people are wrong, for example, because that's kind of what where this goes right away. And as you and I were talking earlier, it just becomes a silly division. It's white against this and that, and then black and white and all that kind of stuff. That serves no purpose for advancing the conversation, right? But it is those people that believe that because their ancestors were here at the time when they begin to count the existence of a nation, right? Mm-hmm. The States is the same thing. It was people from Great Britain that came here and from other nations in Europe, right? Same thing happened. We see more modern examples of that in South Africa. Yep. We can't say. We see now an example of that in Israel, right? Mm-hmm. Where there's also the illegal settlements and all that are part of, as many people have said, it's part of, when you look at the makeup of the people that live in Israel, a lot of them are from Europe, from Eastern Europe and so on, from Russia, places like that, right? It's still a part of the European expansion, right? It's only been like 500 years, but those 500 years, if you look at history, for example, we talk about the Dark Ages in history, medieval times, and so all these periods usually last about 500 years, right? When a system, an arrangement it's in place and it's strong enough to sustain itself for about 500 years until it evolves into its own destruction, right? They argue about culture, right? This is our culture. When people come here, they don't accept the culture. Well, what is the culture of a place like the United States and Canada? We have a culture, right? We have a sort of a very young culture, just talking about Canada, right? Where our national sport, it's glorified, and rightly so, it's fun, right? Hockey, wow. We all get behind that. That's part of the national identity. That's good. Many other things, right? But that is kind of a new history, right? It's the history of the nation of settlers, right? It's Canada and the United States. But let's look at the United States. I follow this guy on Instagram. He's so sharp, but he says he's talking to Americans. We're so hung up that things are American, right? Pizza is Italian. He says democracy is Greek. And he names all these things that Americans are proud of, and they're all imported, right? Or they're all stolen or borrowed from other places. And so Canada is no different, right? When I saw actually an interview of the guy that was leading the protest yesterday of, which mostly white European background people that were leading a concerned immigration rally, that they're concerned. The guy actually, once he was interviewed, says, I'm not against immigration. Okay, I'll give him that. But he says, we should be careful who we let in. So that's a very, very, very scary thing. Who are we going to let in? Who's going to decide, right? One final point about that. The other point is, excuse me, but are we, the whole world, not in the globalization phase, where everything got globalized, where, my products and my services and my trade and dollars and everything can penetrate anywhere in the world? Well, people can do the same thing, right? And people must do the same thing, because when I say must, not as a, hey, you must do this, but I'm saying there's no other way to do things when you need, for example, people to travel the world and to be stationed in different parts of the world, people that are from all parts of the world, because now we're all involved and we're all part of this global trade, right? And global trade is not just, hey, I send you a kilogram of sugar and you reciprocate, send me a kilogram of bread or whatever from my country, right? There are so many intricate pieces of that, right? There's oil, there's parts, there's information, there's money, there's all kinds of things that are being traded constantly every second of the day, and that affects every single one of us, every single nationality. Countries in Africa have raw materials, countries in Latin America have other materials, China and Asia, all all continents have their own contribution to this global economy. And if we think that people do not participate in the global economy, we're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And these people are also part of this global thing now, right? So there's so many reasons why it's this argument of, we are the one people, and when we allow people to come here, they change everything. That is a perception, right? Like if I'm walking down the street with a Maple Leafs jersey and I'm happy and I'm drinking Canadian beer, and all of a sudden I see a group of people that are dancing, I don't know, Punjabi or something like that, to their music. Why do I feel threatened all of a sudden? They're taking over. It's a perception, and it's such a childish perception. It belongs in an elementary school yard, right? Mm-hmm. Where people think, maybe maybe there's more of them than there is of us. What is the problem with that, mm-hmm. right? So there's so much to be said, but I think that those 5 points, I think, that would cover the argument of why it's such a ridiculous thing to pretend that you can preserve some sort of purity, right? And I'm not talking about racial purity, some sort of cultural purity, when there's the purity, the culture itself it's an impure culture. In other words, it's a culture that has borrowed from everything.
Absolutely. I mean, you can go anywhere and get delicious Indian food, Chinese food, Greek food, you name it. That's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's. I mean, on so many levels we can have a conversation on a sort of social psychological level. Why do people feel threatened? On an individual level, psychologically, we could say, well, you feel threatened because you're insecure. You don't think you have what it takes to compete with these people, right? Mm-hmm. That's another thing, right?
And I feel that there's a lot of social media injecting a lot of division, and I think that's by design. And you and I have talked about this, and I genuinely believe that the powers, those who are in power have a lot of money invested in keeping people divided. Keeping people divided in the sense of, no, you're from here, we're from here, you're not allowed in. Immigration, it's getting out of hand, we can't allow it. It's destroying our culture, our country. And as we talked about that protest, I don't know who the leader of that protest in Canada was, in Toronto. It feels like they're not questioning, and they're not asking the right questions. They're just looking at something on social media. They're seeing, yes, there's more, like your example, more Punjabi people here. So what?
I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right. I think perhaps 80%, I'm just totally making up this number, but maybe let's say 70%, right, of the population are that, right? We're sheeps, basically.
Yeah, and they're just allowing.
We're being hypnotized by social media and all those things. However, I've said this before, and the reason I say it is not just because I've observed it myself here or in the lately in the last few years or anything like that. I saw this when I was growing up in Chile as well. Mm-hmm. I was born in Chile during a dictatorship, and I saw I see how these things work. I know the formula because I lived it for over a decade, right? Mm-hmm. Being there, and I know how this works, right? So there are people that are like you and I, right? This is who I preach to when I talk about intellectual wellness. It's like, wake up. There are many ways of thinking. You just don't be so overwhelmed with your life, with work and your schedule that you don't have time to give this political thing any thought, because it's not politics is not about those guys up there that are making decisions. Politics is about you. You're going to have to give them the vote. Without the vote, they're nothing. That's why they always have to spend so much money, so much effort, and design so many schemes to manipulate people, because they have to get our vote. And if we are not doing our homework and doing our critical thinking and then embracing our responsibility to mm-hmm. think about this a little bit deeper, then, we're going to, do exactly what you're saying, right? However, I will say that there's perhaps a smaller portion of the population that don't give a shit whether they're hypnotized or not. And maybe they're not being hypnotized. They have their own ideology, and their ideology is very well set. In fact, you can point to the Christian nationalist in the United States, right? that they're not very vulnerable to what's going on in mainstream society, right? So perhaps maybe you see it, they're not as gullible to advertising, things like that, right? Maybe because they try to conserve a sort of a Christian. We're talking about extreme. We're not talking about every Christians. I mean, you and I were talking about this. The one that I believe is the second largest religion in the world is Catholicism, right? That's Christians as well. But I'm talking about this really small niche of people, right? That are very vocal in the United States right now, right? And so these are people that believe that they have a mission and that they believe this is a divine mission, right? It's a a mission that has to do with God, right? And so they're making a very conscious decision and a very conscious effort to carry out this this tradition of opposition to other races or other ethnicities, other cultures, because also they're involved with other religions, right? And so, I saw this in Chile. There are the people that are more than willing to do the killing. There are people that are more than willing to do the hating. There are people that are more than willing to do the spreading shit and lies more than you think, right? Because if we accept, I'm not somebody that thinks that because I'm on the left, I think that humans are good by nature, and there's so much potential for humans. But when you have experienced what I've experienced, you know that there's good and evil in this world, right? Mm-hmm. And fortunately, I think that good is bigger than evil. But there are those few that do embrace a very evil thing, and that's hatred, basically. And so it doesn't matter what the social media thing is doing, right? What the algorithms are doing. They got their own algorithm. They got their own agenda. Their agenda is to hate, and they're willing to kill for it. And they're willing to support anyone that is willing to give them the green light to kill. One more thing about that. I've said it before. They're cowards. The reason why they're not always killing in every decade of a century is because there are cycles in politics. And so they wait for the right time, the right cycle, when there's a leader, a cultish leader that allows them, that gives them the green light to come out and perform their hatred on people. Mm-hmm. But be very aware of that there are those that are waiting in the margins, waiting to act out their hate.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more of that. And it was surprising to see that in Canada because we're seeing that more. So I'm aware of that, but it's not just social media, because mainstream media is also very much involved in this, which is owned by those who, again, divide and conquer, right? And I mean, that's the thing. I think we're innately good human beings, but when you turn on the news, the mainstream media, 99% of it is doom and gloom,
for sure,
right? And then the 1% is not.
It is divide and conquer, right?
It is, absolutely. And I think we need to wake up.
Yeah, so, projecting, right? And all these terms that are used today, gaslighting and all that kind of stuff, right? They're always turning minorities against minorities. Mm-hmm. The minorities that are darker than you are the problem. The minorities that are socialist are the problem. The minority that are communist are the problem. The minorities that are on the left. The only minority that's fucking up this world, and the only minority we should be concerned with, is the 1%, as they're known, right? That they're controlling the world. Divide and conquer.
Yeah,
right?
And the reality is, people, you may think there's a left and a right, a Democrat and a conservative. It's all the same. It is.
It's all the same in terms of mainstream politics.
That's what I'm saying.
But there are ideologies on the left and spectrum.
And on the right.
And on the right, yes, absolutely. And they're
and
legitimate.
To say that everyone is under one or two categories is insane. I think, so I was born here. I grew up here. My version of Canada is very different, very accepting, right? And what I'm seeing now is it's scary. Right? It's very concerning. And it's true with the states, we follow suit with the states, and you see what's going on in the state. Everything with Charlie Kirk, what are we seeing now is the freedom of speech is now being policed, if you will. So the vice president has come out and said, if your neighbor says anything negative about Charlie Kirk, let us know. That same bullshit happened during COVID. If you know that your neighbor did not get vaccinated, call this hotline.
Happened in Nazi Germany.
Exactly. So this is very concerning.
Happened in Chile.
But
People snitching on their
the
neighbors.
thing.
Yeah.
Like you're allowed to have your own opinions. As long as you're not hurting anyone, that's fine. But you also have to question things. You have to question the narrative, is what I'm saying. And I think a lot of people are not. And that's what's very concerning. So I want to hear from you the formula that you saw in Chile. And perhaps some of you will hear this and say, oh, this might be happening now. So one of them, which we touch base on, is snitch on your neighbor. That happened with COVID. Your neighbor doesn't have the vaccine, give us a call. That's happening now in the States. The vice president, call if someone's saying something negative about Charlie Kirk's assassination. Why? What else is the formula in Chile?
I mean, to your point, right? Like I hate when people say the left and the right, because first of all, they don't even know what the left and right is. I'm not trying to say that I know and people don't know. I mean, the majority of people have no idea what the right, and they believe it's just the Democratic Party in the States and the Republican Party representing each. And in Canada, they think it's the Liberal Party is left. But they haven't, the left is so diverse. The right, it's a little bit more less diverse, but it's also diverse, right? You have people on the right that are not religious. You have people on the right that are very focused on justice and things like that, but they're very conservative in terms of fiscal conservatism. They're concerned morally with conservatism, stuff like that. But so there is diversity on the right, but the left is way more diverse, right? There are so many ideologies there, right? There's from anarchism, socialism, communism, all kinds of stuff, right? There's also the left, as they call it, right? As it's more likely to be, not only tolerant, but also promoting the rights of, difference, right? So nowadays, we're not just talking about different political ideologies, but we're talking about also gender, we're talking about women's rights, we're talking about, race and all that kind of stuff, right? Whereas the right is a little bit more simplistic of a message, right? Because it's all about, trying to conserve, right? But yeah, so the formula is, I think, the formula that it's fascism. That's the thing, right? So if anybody has read anything on fascism, they see that this is happening all over again, right? This is what happened in Chile. Chile was, what they did is with the influence and the United States actually pushing and influencing and providing financial assistance and so on, and destabilizing the economy, they created the right conditions for a military coup, right? That overthrew the president, elected. Democratically elected president, nonviolent at all, and so they killed him. They killed thousands of people, disappeared thousands of people for 16 years. There were, it was a fascist society. You couldn't talk again. You could not even have a conversation. Like you and I would not be having a conversation right now. There'll be somebody waiting outside the door for sure, right, to take us away and disappear us. And not only that, so the freedom of speech, as you were saying, that's the first thing that goes. Intellectualism. And I want intellectualism, and again, I don't want to, I want to emphasize it's not just smart people, but we're talking about artists, creatives, we're talking about professors. Nowadays, and that add to that, creators online, right? Because there are people that use their mind to do things. The burning of books, all this is, textbook stuff from the Nazis as well, right? They suppress and telling the universities what to teach, right? Well, hello, what's happening right now? All those things, squealing on your neighbors, divide and conquer, right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of the formula. The other part of the formula is that violence, right? Political violence. And we're seeing it right now. The other part of the formula is inciting violence, right? And so there definitely you see all those signs there. Yeah, and the controlling the press, what's supposed to be the free press, is already pretty
propaganda,
controlled, right?
Yeah.
But now, as you can see, it's have to be controlled even more because freedom of speech is not. The irony again is that it's the right that's usually talking about unlimited, unfiltered, unrestricted freedom of speech. But yet that's exactly what's happening right now.
Yeah.
But anyways, so those are the things. Is if you understand fascism, you understand what's happening today, right? And so what can people do, right? What can people do to people? You said it yourself, and this is the whole idea of, and this is again, I'll refer to Noam Chomsky, who has written so much about fascism, right? And he's being a Jewish person himself and his family, right? Suffered of course, the consequences of Nazi Germany on the Jewish people, the impact that had on Jews, all over the world, right? So he knows that, but also as an academic, he understands, what propaganda is, right? He's the one that said that, violence is to a dictatorship, but, propaganda is to democracy, right? So he understands that those mechanisms of, thought control are there in a quote unquote free society, right? And so what does he talk about? He talks about a course of intellectual self-defense. That's what I do with people all the time is just trying to put it back in their hands. What is it that I'm trying to put back in their hands? The power of of their own thinking, their own decisions, right? And we become really lazy at thinking, right? We all think about what we're going to have for dinner, what our career should be, who we're going to marry, what we're going to wear. Should I get the newest iPhone or not? What should I do? Even in the self-development, the name is right there, the self-development space, which I'm part of course, it's about developing yourself. It's about that, right? And if you're into creating community, well, you're airy-fairy, a community. What's a community, right? A community of people that are mindful and this and that. Or, a community, that spells almost communism, right? So there's always, forming community, right? And forming strong community based on good values and solidarity is very difficult in this day and age in a capitalist society, right? And so we're always after the dollar and always after, ensuring that we're going to be taken care of, right? Very selfish. But that's important. Anyways, I'm going on a huge tangent here.
Yeah, so I've been hearing a lot of arguments about how we're allowing so many immigrants in and they're taking our jobs. And when they come in, they're given thousands of dollars housing, and they're not helping the actual Canadian people. So that to me...
Myth.
Well, I want you to prove it. Prove it. Show me someone that's, come here from a country that says, look, I arrived here the first day, I got a house, I got a car, I got $5,000, and I'm not going to work. And if I do, I'll take your job.
The reason they're doing that, the reason they say that, because it's not officials that are saying that, right? The people that work in the government that know that. So there's certainly financial assistance for people that come here. Obviously, you're going to have somebody that came with nothing, especially people that are fleeing, horrible situations. Think of Palestine, think of anywhere in the world as refugees, they come here. So there has to be a system set up to help them out. Now, it's a system set up to help them out, and like welfare, like EI, like all these social programs that we have here in Canada, they're not permanent, right? They have a limit, right? And so the whole thing is when you go through the system, you're always encouraged and you're given some of the resources so you can stop depending on that as soon as possible, right? The proof is this. The proof is that Canada and its strong economy continues to be a strong and stable economy, and the society continues to be, after all these decades that we've had people of all kinds of people from all kinds of cultures and nationalities and stuff like that, right? And so if it is true that, immigrants are given basically everything that Canadians are not given, you would have a completely failed society where you would have 50% that do absolutely nothing and they live in a mansion and they have cars and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the other 50% that are working. That's a ridiculous proposition altogether, right? You do have social programs that help people.
Absolutely.
And some are more robust than others. But if you come here, obviously in the beginning, you're going to be given a helping hand, but the return on that investment is huge. It is known that people that come here come from such desperate situations that they're willing to do anything, and they do. They clean toilets, they do all those things for years. They live together in one house, and eventually they get ahead of the game. Most of them, hopefully. And that's the history of immigration in a developed country, right? And so they're going to try the people that are trying to the people that are against immigration, they're going to do the opposite. They're going to tell you stories, these anecdotal things. They knew somebody that used to go pick up their welfare check and drove in a Mercedes, and then they had a Rolex and all this kind of stuff. And so even if there's one case like that, who knows why it happened, but I can certainly see that if somebody had a great job one day and lost it all, well, still carry their Rolex if that's the case, and probably they'll still have their car, but they still need to eat, right? So they might go to the welfare to pick up a welfare check, as they say, right? But these are stories that are made up, and people run with them, right? Because it serves as evidence that they give to say, see, I told you, this is what immigrants do when they come here. And nothing could be further from the truth. Again, the contribution that immigrants they have made to just Canada alone, it's incredible. Let's look at our history. Let's look at our educational system. Let's look at medicine. Let's look at our IT. Let's look at all the industries. Pretty much, the contribution by immigrants of all nationalities, including Europeans, has been incredibly great. Right? Otherwise, this country could not go on. So to continue to try to, create this narrative where, the first people that came here were so good and so moral and so perfect in a sense.
So far from the truth.
I mean, look at what happened in the United States. It's even more of an obvious case, right? They had slavery, for fuck's sakes, right? And right up until in the 1960s, they had the
segregations.
What's that?
The
segregation. It was all legislated. It was all legal, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Jim Crow and all that. It was all legal, right? It's not like people are making it up. So it's not like, again, in the past, when this is the thing about Make America Great Again. These are code words for let's make it what. When we control things a little bit more, and all these leftists didn't have, I believe it was Charlie Kirk that was saying that the civil rights was a big mistake. DI is always under attack, right? Always with made up stories, right? DI has done great things, right? DI has been able to make workplaces and living places accessible for people that are in a wheelchair, people have physical, some sort of physical ability challenges, right? It has made it possible for women, right, to be included. Now we don't even think about that, but that 50 years ago was a thing. I mean, when I was growing up as a kid, women were still fighting to get to have a place in society, right? So it's not like our old history here, right? So, anyways, let's head to a conclusion.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think Canadians, as a fellow Canadian, we need to, bring this awareness. Like, let's move past all this and accept people. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter your race. We're all here as immigrants. We're all working hard. It doesn't matter where you come from. We're human beings, Let's not listen to all the, mainstream narratives of divide and conquer, social media. Just look at your neighbor with love, right? I mean, at the end of the day, when I think of Israel and Palestine, there's a genocide happening there. And the fact that people are arguing whether it's right or wrong is just beyond me. Like, let's stop looking at the divide and look at each other as, as brothers and sisters and and be there for each other and help each other out.
Yeah.
Our parents had, like my parents had the opportunity to come here with nothing, and, you know, they worked hard, right? Why can't that story be for someone else that's coming from any part of the world today? You know, why was it okay for them and not for these new people, right? So I think we really need to question what we're listening to. And
for sure, again, you know, it's a course of intellectual self-defense. Be more critical. Don't just assume that whatever you're hearing in the news is the right thing.
Yeah.
Do your research. Today more than ever, you just Google anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
Don't fall for you know, conspiracy theories, and I have to qualify that because conspiracy theories are good. I mean, you know, lawyers argue about conspiracies all the time, you know,
Mm-hmm.
conspiracy to commit murder or whatever. So not all conspiracy theories are cuckoo, but, you know, some are. But, you know, do your research and also have an intention, you know, just like when you go into a meditation or you go into a meeting, you have an intention. What's your intention for that research?
Yeah.
Don't get lost in a lot of
do you want to hate or do you want to love?
gossiping
Like
out
what,
there.
what
Yeah.
kind of world do you want to live in?
But that's a tradition it's part of our human tradition as well. Let's think of Gandhi. Let's think of so many people that we can name. Martin Luther King Jr. Let's think of so many people that we can name here in Canada, so many names. Think of somebody like Terry Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he wasn't political, but in a sense he was. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, pay attention, you know. I am hurting and I'm not be able to do this. We need to help the people that
Yeah.
are going to be suffering with a cancer like me or other illnesses that can devastate the family. Let's look at this, right? That's a Canadian hero. That's a Canadian hero for love and for peace.
Mm-hmm.
We have, you know, universal health care, right? You know, that's an amazing thing, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing that everybody has access to that. So I think I would say you're right. You would say to people, don't be caught up in social media and believe everything. I would say to people, if you are going to do your research, maybe first look at the history in the world that has been about love, about solidarity, about principles, more principles of tolerance and you know, and helping one another. If it's a religious thing, yeah, let's look at the real, you know, teachings of Christ, right? Help the other person, you know, forgive, turn your cheek, right? Whatever, turn the other cheek, whatever, I can't remember that. All those things, right? This is all about love and about loving each other and supporting each other. So there's a parallel universe right there.
Yeah.
All you need to do is tap into that instead of the other,
Absolutely.
right? There's good and evil, there's hate and love, there's a huge tradition of love in our country, and even in the United States of America. I just mentioned a couple, right?
Yeah.
So it's not difficult to find that and to embrace that and to run with it,
Yeah.
right? What is difficult is to do nothing. So if you're doing nothing, as the saying says, if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything, right? And I think that's the message, because the elites are going to do what they're going to do,
Yeah.
but they do.
But we're the majority.
We do need they do need our consent.
Yeah, we're
and
the
our
majority,
consent,
everyone.
Right. And we're only going to give it if we continue to be intellectually lazy and not think about what we should be thinking about.
Like those who are working in ICE, right?
Right.
Like that's a great example.
Yeah.
I mean, the other day it
Choose.
was just insane. I don't know if you saw this, but really quickly, there was someone saying "shame on you" because I don't know, they were in a Walmart or something, arresting people, abducting people. Sorry, they're not arresting, abducting, other people that are not American, aliens as they're called, and they said, "Shame on you. Where are you from?" And the guy's like, "I'm not Mexican. I'm from Puerto Rico or Costa Rica." And I thought to myself, oh, okay, that makes sense.
He's an idiot, because they're even
makes
revoking
sense.
citizenship for people that are born in the United States, right? And
Yeah.
they're even threatening people that are
And
not.
This is the
of
same
color.
person. One had an
Yeah.
accent, wasn't born and raised, but they were
So like I
first
said
in
to
line.
you, it's when people have made up their mind that this is the right thing, they will do it. So it's not a race thing, right? This is good that you mentioned that. It's not a white thing. It's not a thing that, only white people embrace. Yeah, you look at ICE, there's a multicolored thing there. But what's in their hearts and in their minds? Hate.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it is. And they're willing to act it out. And that's what I mean by those bigots in the closet. And it's not just white people. It's easy to focus on Ku Klux Klan and, the white minority that usually have lower education and stuff like that. And those are usually in the media, right? The Trump followers and all that. But we're talking about anybody, any race, any country, because they buy into this ideology that is based on hate and difference, that is not based on love, right?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we have a choice to wake up and connect to the love inside of us and share that with everyone and see the love in everyone, or wake up and hate the world, hate ourselves,
Right.
hate each other. So
Yeah. So maybe start your morning with gratitude.
yeah.
To tie it
Which we
all
always
into the
do.
wellness space.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is intellectual wellness. Intellectual wellness is not about being smart. I've said that a million times. It's about thinking better. Thinking better. And the way to think better is say, I don't know what I'm going to think about. I mean, it's hard. I'm going to think, then say this to yourself. I'm going to think about whatever, but I'm going to think about it from the point of view of love,
Yeah.
from the stance of love. It's going to be my point of origin. I'm going to start thinking anything that I think about, I'm going to put it through the filter of love and tolerance and solidarity and compassion and empathy. And I'm going to try to leave out whatever that comes up that's resentful, like, oh, maybe my boss is an asshole and I got to go to work. Leave that aside for now. Maybe if you put everything through the lens of love and peace, you are going to maybe come up with different conclusions, and then your relationship with your asshole boss is going to probably be similar, but now you're going to have another way to deal with it rather than be, all burnt inside, right, with all that hate, right?
So yeah, start your day leading with gratitude, leading with love, and question everything.
Yeah, this is not a hippie thing, y'all. It's love and peace is not a hippie thing.
It's not even about that. It's just we all have it in us. So let's bring it out.
Okay, awesome, great point to end on, and thanks for bringing up the subject.
Thank you.